Every Viking who ever died in battle chose that risk. They picked up the weapon. They stepped onto the field. But there is a kind of death no Viking ever chose. One that came quietly, without warning, in the deepest hours of the night, inside their own home, while the people they loved were sleeping just inches away. No enemy, no blade. Just the dark, and the cold, and the silence. Now strip away everything standing between you and that darkness tonight. The thermostat on your wall. The insulated windows, the synthetic layers engineered by modern science to hold your body heat. Take all of it away, and what remains is a night so cold, so absolute, that it doesn't touch your skin. It moves through you, the way freezing water moves through cloth. Medieval records tell us that in the worst Scandinavian winters, entire settlements lost up to a third of their most vulnerable. Not to war, not to hunger, but to the night itself. Slow and silent and certain. So the question that actually matters is not how the Vikings fought, it is how they slept. How did ordinary people, farmers, mothers, children, grandparents, survive night after night in one of the most hostile climates ever inhabited by human beings? What would you have done with nothing but your hands, your knowledge, and the warmth of the person beside you? There is one answer, and it was never a single trick, a single tool, or a single act of Viking toughness. It was a system, invisible, interlocking, and almost completely lost to time. By the end of this, you will understand every layer of it, and the secret hidden at the very center of that system, the one that made all the rest possible, may be the last thing you would ever expect. The first line of defense wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a warrior standing at the door. It was the building itself. From the outside, a Viking longhouse looked almost unremarkable. A long, low structure pressed close to the earth, a thick roof stretching downward on both sides, a thin trail of smoke rising slowly into a gray northern sky. To modern eyes, it might look primitive. It might even look poor. But here is the quiet irony that should stop you for a moment. A $500,000 home built today, with its flat walls and thin insulated panels, would struggle to survive a true Scandinavian winter without a functioning heating system. That Viking longhouse, built from timber, earth, and grass, didn't need one. The shape of the building was the first weapon. Longhouses were built low and slightly curved, so that brutal Arctic winds rolled over the structure instead of hammering flat walls. Then came the roof. Not wooden shingles, but thick layers of living turf, heavy slabs of soil and grass, packed together into something that breathed and insulated at the same time. Soil holds countless pockets of trapped air inside its roots and fibers, and trapped air is one of nature's most stubborn insulators. Then winter itself became an ally. As snow gathered on top of that turf roof, it added a second insulating layer on top of the first. The colder the storm grew outside, the more protected the family became inside. Somewhere in that longhouse, a mother could watch the snow falling against the walls and feel something that no thermostat could ever give her, the quiet certainty that her children would be warm through the night. But architecture alone could not hold the cold forever. So the Vikings built a second system, one hidden inside the stone floor at the heart of the home. During the day, a long stone hearth burned steadily, not wildly, not recklessly, but with the patience of people who understood that fire's greatest gift is not its flame. It is the heat that stone remembers long after the flame is gone. As night approached, the fire was slowly reduced to coals, then carefully covered in ash to keep them smoldering. The stones surrounding that hearth had spent the entire day drinking in warmth, and through the long dark hours, they quietly gave it back. The house didn't just hold heat, it had learned how to store it. But the house was only the first layer. What came next was worn on their skin, and it was worth more than gold. To a modern person, wool is something you find folded quietly in a closet, pulled out when the weather turns. To a Viking, wool was something closer to oxygen. It was the difference between a family that made it to spring and one that didn't. The sheep grazing across the Scandinavian hills produced a remarkable fleece. Two distinct layers working together, long outer fibers that resisted wind and weather, and beneath them a dense soft underlayer that held warmth against the skin like a second body. When spun and woven together, These fibers created a fabric called vadmal, heavy, dense, nearly windproof, and so valuable that people paid their taxes with it, settled debts with it, and traded it like currency across the northern world. But here is the thing that separates the Viking mindset from almost everything we understand about comfort today. They didn't buy warmth. They built it, thread by thread, season by season, with their own hands. Nothing was ever wasted. A mother would carefully unravel a worn-out garment, not throw it away, and spin its fibers back into new thread. Old wool became bedding. Scraps too small to weave were pressed into wall cracks to stop the cold from creeping through. Every fiber had a purpose, because every fiber held heat, and heat in a Viking winter was not a comfort. It was a resource as precious as food. That same philosophy shaped how they built their beds. The sleeping surface began with a layer of straw or pine branches, creating thousands of tiny air pockets beneath the body. Above that came animal skins, reindeer fur in particular, and this is where modern science offers something extraordinary. Reindeer hair is hollow. Each individual strand traps a microscopic pocket of air inside itself, which is exactly why reindeer can survive temperatures that would kill most animals. The Vikings didn't know the biology, but they understood the result. On top of those furs came thick wool blankets, heavy and dense, sealing everything in. Layer by layer, the bed became less a place to sleep and more a carefully engineered pocket of survival warmth. But all of this, the wool, the furs, the layers, meant nothing if the people inside made one critical mistake in the hours just before sleep. Here is the mistake that seems obvious but would have quietly killed you. When the temperature dropped and the darkness closed in, every instinct tells you to add more layers, more clothing, more fabric between your skin and the cold. But the Vikings understood something that takes modern winter survival experts years of hard experience to learn. Moisture is a more efficient killer than cold. Throughout the day, heavy outer garments absorbed sweat, snow, and the damp breath of winter air. If you carried that moisture into your bed, it would cling to your skin through the night, and wet fabric pulls heat away from the human body with a speed that dry air simply cannot match. So before sleep, Vikings did something that felt counterintuitive. They removed their outer layers. They slept in simple linen, light, breathable fabric that allowed the skin to release its own warmth without trapping the dampness that would steal it back. In some cases, people slept with very little clothing at all, relying instead on something far more powerful than any garment. They relied on each other. Sleeping alone in a Viking longhouse wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a thermal miscalculation. The human body at rest is a furnace that never fully goes out, and when several bodies share the same space, beneath thick furs and wool, that heat compounds. It doesn't just add, it multiplies. Families slept together along the same long benches, pressed close beneath layers of wool and reindeer skin, and the arrangement was never random. Children and elders were placed toward the center, where warmth gathered most easily. Stronger adults slept along the outer edges, where cold drafts crept in from the walls. Grandparents, parents, children, all of them nested together in the dark. And in that closeness, something beyond survival was happening. Warmth became something physical that one generation gave to the next. It was love expressed not in words, but in body heat shared without question through the longest nights of the year. But the body cannot give what it doesn't have. Science tells us that core body temperature begins to drop within the first hour of sleep, and a body running low on fuel loses that battle faster than almost anything else. This is why the Viking evening meal was never light, never casual, never an afterthought. Fatty meats, preserved fish, thick stews heavy with butter. These weren't indulgences. They were engineering. Foods rich in fat and protein digest slowly, releasing energy in a long, steady burn that lasts through the night, generating heat from within the body itself, turning every sleeping person into a small internal furnace that kept working long after the hearth had faded to ash. They didn't eat to enjoy the night. They ate to survive it. Every bowl was a calculation. Every bite was preparation. And yet, with all of this in place, the house, the wool, the layered beds, the shared warmth, the food, there was still one form of cold that none of it could fully stop. The cold that scared them most wasn't outside the walls. It was inside the mind. Northern winters are not defined by cold alone. They are defined by darkness, a darkness so complete and so prolonged that it becomes its own kind of weight. For weeks at a time, the sun barely climbs above the horizon. Daylight shrinks to a dim gray window of just a few hours, and then the long night returns again, pressing down on the land for 20 hours or more. In that kind of darkness, isolation doesn't creep in slowly, it arrives all at once. And for people living without electric light, without screens, without the endless noise of modern life to fill the silence, the psychological toll of a Scandinavian winter was as real and as dangerous as the cold itself. What the Vikings built against that darkness was not a tool, it was a ritual. When the doors of the Longhouse closed against the wind each evening, the interior became something deliberate, a space of rhythm, story, and shared purpose. Sagas were told beside the glowing hearth, tales of ancestors, distant voyages, battles survived and impossible odds overcome. Men carved and repaired by firelight. Women spun wool and wove cloth, hands moving in the steady rhythm that turns hours of darkness into something productive and calm. Songs were sung, games were played. The Longhouse held warmth, not just in its walls, but in the sound of human voices refusing to go quiet. Today, researchers call what those long winters produce seasonal affective disorder, a condition affecting nearly 10% of the population across Northern Europe even now, in an age of artificial light and central heating. The Vikings had no name for it, but they had the cure. They had already solved it 1,000 years ago, not with medicine, but with community, ritual, and the deliberate choice to fill the darkness with meaning rather than silence. And now we return to the secret promised at the very beginning, the one thing that holds every layer of this system together. It was never the turf roof. It was never the stored heat in the stones. It was never the reindeer fur or the vadmal or the fatty stew simmering over the fire. The secret was this: no single part of the system worked alone. The house needed the fire needed the food needed the body needed other bodies. And all of it needed the mind, to stay strong enough to keep going. Survival was never an individual achievement. It was a collective one, built quietly, layer by layer, night after night, by ordinary people who understood that warmth, real warmth, is never something one person creates alone. So here is the question that this story leaves with you. Not about Vikings, not about history, but about right now. What is your own winter? What is the cold in your life that you have been trying to face alone, one layer at a time, when what you actually need is a system and the people willing to build it with you? Because civilization was never constructed by comfort. It was built by people who understood that the night is long, the cold is real, and the only way through it is together.